If networking makes you cringe, I want you to ask yourself something. Is it networking that you dislike, or is it the version of networking you've been taught? The version where you walk into this crowded room, you deliver your resume to strangers, you collect a bunch of business cards, and then hope an opportunity somehow will just fall out of that exchange. And that approach actually feels really uncomfortable because it turns a human interaction into a performance. And you're trying to sound interesting and impressive and valuable before either person has had the opportunity to establish a true and real relationship. And quiet professionals don't need to perform extroversion to actually build a powerful professional network. What works much better is a combination of curiosity, usefulness, and follow through. So in this video, I want to show you how networking for introverts can feel more natural, how to prepare without sounding like you are needing a whole entire different personality, and how to turn one conversation into a professional relationship that actually develops over time. A lot of professionals avoid networking because they associate it with really crowded events, having to be forced into small talk or self-promotion, and the pressure to meet as many people as possible. And honestly, that version of networking will drain almost anyone. But strong networking isn't built through this one really impressive interaction. It develops because people learn something meaningful about each other and discover a reason to stay connected and continue the relationship after the first conversation. And that is especially important for quiet professionals who want more visibility, influence, and career growth. So your work may be strong, but opportunities are also being shaped by who understands your capabilities and who remembers your perspective and who can picture you contributing at a higher level. And building those relationships are really important, and you don't have to build those relationships by becoming louder, being overly polished, or having to be overly performative. So let me start by one of the least useful ways to measure networking success, and it is by the number of contacts that you collect. So you can leave an event with 15 new LinkedIn connections and still have no meaningful relationships. So a better way to evaluate the interaction is to ask these 3 questions. Did I learn something meaningful about this person? Did they understand something useful or relevant about me? And did we create a credible reason to continue the conversation? And when those 3 things happen, the interaction has somewhere to go. So this is why I think networking is closer to farming than hunting. You're not chasing one immediate transaction. You're cultivating relationships through repeated attention, helpful exchanges, and genuine interest over time. And that shift can make networking much easier for introverts, because the goal is to impress a full room of people. The goal is to have a few thoughtful conversations and notice where there may be some mutual relevance. And introverts often bring qualities that are genuinely useful in networking situations. So they tend to listen carefully, they observe details, they ask really thoughtful questions, and they may notice things that other people miss because they're not rushing to take control of the conversation. So those qualities help people feel acknowledged, which is something many people rarely experience in a traditional networking event. So you don't need to control the conversation to make a strong impression. And often the person who asks a really thoughtful question and remembers the answer is far more memorable than the person who speaks for 10 minutes about themselves. So in your networking interaction, you might ask, how did you get into that field? What part of your work interests you most right now? What are you trying to solve? What has changed most in your industry lately? And those questions actually create space for the other person's stories. Just like one of my clients in my group coaching program who had a question about how she could be networking more at a symposium that she was attending. And she was entering these networking conversations with a lot of hesitation. And that's because she was concerned that this was all going to be a performance. This was going to be a way in which she just has to strike up conversations about the weather because that's just what networking is. And in the group coaching session, we actually helped to reframe the intention of her networking. It's about building relationships. It's about being able to help one another to see a different perspective that they've never had seen before in one another. And so this is really about going in with a different set of curiosity, different ways in which you explore each other's interests, and you walk out of there actually building those memorable relationships that's going to continue with time. And she did exactly that. And in fact, in that meeting itself, she got so used to the networking that she was one of the few people who spoke up and asked a question to the CEO during the town hall portion. So it's interesting to see how a little tiny micro shift in what you do that prompts you into action can then have a domino effect into other things that you're trying to accomplish within that setting. So now that you're going to stop treating networking like a numbers game, you still need a simple way to guide the interaction so it becomes more than just a pleasant conversation that disappears when you guys go your separate ways. So the framework I recommend is give, learn, continue. So these 3 parts actually help you build a relationship without forcing the conversation or turning it into an immediate exchange of favors. So when you give, it doesn't mean arriving with a grand offer or trying to prove your usefulness immediately. It can actually be very small. So you might recommend a resource, share an idea, offer a recommendation, make an introduction, or mention something that could help with a challenge that this person described. So for example, I read an article about that issue recently. I'd be happy to send it to you. Or I know someone working on something similar. Would an introduction be useful? Or that sounds like a difficult transition. One thing that helped our team was. So you're showing that you were listening and that you're willing to contribute without demanding an immediately return. Next is to learn. So the next part is learning what matters to the person. So ask about their goals, challenges, work, and interests. So listen for specific details that are worth remembering. So you might ask, what are you hoping to accomplish this year? What is taking most of your attention right now? What has surprised you about this role? What are you trying to figure out next? And the goal isn't to run through a memorized list of questions, right? So choose something that's going to fit the conversation and listen carefully to the answer and then follow the thread with what's going to feel relevant. And when you're really listening and being intentionally present, you will know the next thing to say. So this is where quiet professionals will have that advantage. So you don't need to fill every single pause. You can give the person a moment to think and notice what they emphasize and ask a follow-up question that's going to show that you understand them. Then the next phase is to continue. This is where you are going to turn that interaction into a relationship. So create one specific next step. So you can send the article that you mentioned, make that introduction, invite that person for a short follow-up conversation. You can connect with them on LinkedIn and include a note that actually refers to what you both discussed. And without a continuation point, many good conversations will just fade because both people return to their full calendars and then assume that they will eventually reconnect, but we know that that's not going to happen without intention. So while you say, let's stay in touch, it's not going to create movement. Something more specific sounds like, I enjoyed hearing about the leadership initiative that you're working on. I'm going to send you that article I mentioned tomorrow. Or, I'd like to hear how that project develops. Would you be open to a short conversation next month? The specificity makes follow through easier and more credible. And if you want help with the language for professional conversations, you can download my free resources, 7 Scripts for Leadership Presence. It's going to give you practical ways to introduce yourself, enter conversations, communicate your value, and speak with more clarity without sounding overly rehearsed or self-promotional. So you'll find that link below. And keep watching because the next part will help you prepare for networking without creating a script that's so detailed that you sound like you're just reading off directions. So preparation can make networking feel much easier, especially for introverts who prefer time to process. But useful preparation doesn't mean scripting every single sentence. So before an event or conversation, decide why you are attending. Or are you hoping to learn about a certain field? Do you want to meet people from other parts of your organization? Are you looking for peers who work on similar problems? Do you want to become more visible to leaders in a particular area? And a clear purpose will help you decide which conversations are worth pursuing, and it reduces the feeling that you need to speak to everyone. So you can also identify a few people or types of people that you want to meet. So what you can do is research the organization or the topics that might come up and prepare 2 to 3 current conversation themes. Then develop a concise description for your work. So a useful formula is this. I help specific people address a specific problem so they can achieve a specific result. So fill it in with some words. I help quiet and overlooked professionals communicate their value and position themselves for leadership opportunities. And that gives the other person enough context to understand your work without requiring them to listen to your employment history from, way back to now. Then you can move the conversation outward with a question. So what kind of work are you focused on? How does that connect to what you do? What brought you to this event? So your introduction should create relevance. It doesn't need to prove everything that you've accomplished. And if you're networking internally, you might say, I lead workforce planning for our operations group. And a lot of my work focuses on helping leaders make better decisions about talent and capacity. What part of the business are you supporting? That is enough to open the door. So a thoughtful beginning helps, but professional relationships are usually built by what happens after that first conversation. So what you want to do is to follow up with the interaction. A message like, great meeting you, let's keep in touch. That can be pleasant, but it's also kind of forgettable because so many people are going to be sharing the same or similar type of message. A stronger message would sound like, I enjoyed our conversation about leadership visibility. Here is the article I mentioned about how promotion decisions are shaped. Or, it was great listening about the project you're leading. Your point about stakeholder resistance stayed with me. I'd be interested to hear how the next phase develops. And that message actually shows that you were paying attention, and it reminds the person who you are and gives the relationship some context. When appropriate, follow up within a day or two while the conversation is still fresh. Then allow that relationship to develop naturally. Some people will become close professional contacts. Others, maybe people you reconnect with a few times a year. And some relationships will just stay the way that it is. And that is perfectly fine. And consistency matters more than the intensity here. So you can continue a relationship by sharing a really relevant resource, congratulating someone on a new role, or checking in about a project that they mentioned, or inviting them into a conversation where their perspective would be useful. And those small touch points can create familiarity and trust over time. And lastly, one reason people hesitate to begin networking conversations to begin with is because they feel like they're being trapped in that conversation. So a polite exit makes the interaction easier for both. So you can say, I'm glad we connected. I'm going to circulate, but could I send that resource? Or I'll let you meet some other people, but I'd love to stay in touch. This was really helpful. I'm going to say hello to a few more people before this event ends, but I'll follow up about that introduction. So a good exit acknowledges the conversation, signals what's going to happen next, and also protects both people's time. You're not rejecting the other person. You're ending one interaction professionally so that both of you can continue on with the event. And this is another reason why preparation will help you. When you know how to begin, guide, and then exit a conversation, networking stops feeling like this unpredictable social interaction. So at your next networking event or conference or a professional gathering, give yourself 4 simple goals. Start 3 conversations and learn 1 meaningful fact from each person. Offer 1 useful resource, insight, or connection. Follow up with 1 person within 24 to 48 hours. And notice that none of those goals actually require you to work the room, right? Deliver that perfect introduction or meet 50 people. You're practicing curiosity, usefulness, and follow through. And afterward, reflect on which conversations just felt most natural, what helped the other person open up, and where did you notice genuine shared interest, and what would make the next interaction easier. So the goal here is to build evidence that networking can feel human and useful and aligned with who you are. So networking isn't about collecting business cards. It's really about developing mutually useful professional relationships over time. And those relationships will grow when you become curious about other people, offer something useful when it is appropriate, and follow through on what you said you would do. Quiet and introverted professionals don't need to perform extroversion to have to network effectively. Your ability to listen carefully, ask thoughtful questions, and notice meaningful details can build trust gradually over time. So the next time you enter a networking situation, give yourself a really useful assignment. Learn something, offer something, create 1 reason to continue that relationship. Download my free 7 scripts for leadership presence below if you want practical language to make professional conversations easier, then watch the next video where I'll show you why small talk is not nearly as small as people think and how it can become the bridge to stronger conversations and relationships at work.